we got to the response of Eliphaz Temani. Eliphaz rebukes Eov and says, "Hanisa davar." This is chapter 4, verse 2. "Hanisa davar elecha til'eh va'atzor b'milin miyuchal. Halo hine isat rabim ve'yadayim rafot tehazek." He says, you were able to instruct many, to rebuke people who complained when they were suffering. You gave strength to the weak, etc., etc. Now, when it touches you, you don't know what to do. He says in Pasuk Zayin, in 7, Pasuk 7, Zechor namihu naki avad ve'efo yesharim nichadu. Remember that the righteous one is never, it never perishes. I mean, only good befalls the good people. And finally, he concludes in verse 17, Ha'enosh me'elo ha'yitzdak im me'oseu yitar gaver. Can a mortal man be just before God or pure before his master? This is not sorry about that, but it's not a good translation. He's not saying, can you be just before God or pure before your maker? He says, Ha'enosh me'elo ha'yitzdak. The mem is mem hashimush that shows the relativity of the two nouns. Ha'enosh me'eloah. Can one be more righteous or more correct than God? Can one be purer than his maker? In other words, you can never argue with God. This is what Eliphaz tells Eov. This is chapter 4. In chapter 5, he keeps talking. He says, Kirana yesh onecha, no one will answer you. I'm not going to go through the whole chapter. As I said when we started, Eov is a very lengthy book, and it is deliberately written in that way because the message that he delivers, that the book delivers, is hard to digest. So it has to be wrapped with a lot of verbiage, a lot of words. Eov says in chapter 6, he responds to Eliphaz. He says, "Lushakol ishakel ka'asi vehavati b'moznayim misuyachal." I wish someone could weigh my anger and how upset I am. And he says, so he is upset. He says in verse 11, I'm skipping. If you want to read the whole thing, go and read. It's beautiful. Ma kohi ki ayachel u'ma kitzi ki a'arich nafshi. How strong can I be to have hope? How long can I wait for a better end? For a happy end. And he goes to at the end of the chapter. He says in verse 22. Did I ask you to give me something of yours? He tells his friends. He's very, very upset and disappointed in his friends. He says, did I ask you to deliver me? No. He says, it is so difficult to say good words. Why are you treating me like that? That's Eov's response to Eliphaz. But now Eov turns from talking to his friend, he talks to God. In chapter 7, verse 11, look what Eov says. I will speak in the anguish of my spirit, will complain in the bitterness of my soul. What is his complaint? Hayam ani imtanin kitasim alay mishma. Am I a sea or a sea monster that you have said, watch over me? If I think that I will find comfort in my bed, in my sleep, you scare me with dreams and nightmares. He's so desperate that he wants to die. This is how he's feeling now through his disaster. And he tells God, "Ma enosh ki tegaddelenu v'chitashit elav libecha v'tivkadenu livkarim l'rega'im tivchanenu." We have this pasuk in Tehillim, famous pasuk, "Ma enosh ki tivkadenu ben adam ki teda'inu," right? Also in chapter 8, we speak about how God chooses mankind and elevates them. But now Eov uses it in a negative way. He says, "Why am I so important to you? What do you want from me?" And realize that, remember we said in the beginning, Eov does not turn against God. He does not curse. He does not utter blasphemy. but it really tatters on that really very, very narrow path at the edge of the cliff where he could fall over and commit that sin that he's so afraid of. So he says, I'm going back to the text. He says, "Ma enosh ki tegadelenu v'chitashit elav libecha." He says, why do you make me great? Now you scrutinize and examine me constantly. V'tifkedenu libkarim lirga'im tivchanenu. You check me every morning, every moment, not just every moment. Kama lo tishrei mimeni lo tarpeni ad bil'i ruki. He says, you don't let me breathe. You don't let go of me. I don't even have time to swallow my spittle, my saliva. This is someone who's really very, very upset, and he feels that the powers at play here are unequal and unbalanced. He says, why am I important to you? In a way, it's like the question that we raised: why did God even create the world? This is what Eov says. Going to the next chapter, chapter 8. Vayan Bildad Ashuhi, his other friend joins in, and just like Eliphaz, the common response of people who don't know how to deal with a person in distress, and what he says sounds to them like blasphemy. He says, until when will you speak these things and the word of your mouth like a mighty wind, meaning you're talking vanities? You think that God will pervert judgment or the Almighty distort justice? It's probably your children who sinned against him and he sent them away, meaning to death because of their sin. So Bildad supports the argument of Eliphaz. And I think it's also interesting that the word Bildad sounds like Levadad. He like leaves Eov alone. Eov doesn't have a friend in Bildad. Vayan Eov in chapter 9, Vayomar, Omnam yadati kichen, Uma yitzdak enosh im el. Im yahpotz lariv imo lo ya'anenu achat mini aleph. If Eov says, you're right, I cannot fight with God. If I would desire to contend with him, I could not answer 1 out of 1,000 questions. And then he describes the greatness of God. Hama'atik Harim removes mountains. He shakes the earth. But note that he doesn't describe, not like in Tehillim 104, Barechi Nafshi, where the description is very positive. Here, the description is sort of negative. He shakes the earth. The pillars tremble. He tells the sun not to rise. He tells the stars not to come out. And then what if he does that to the great, the mighty wonders of nature? What does he do? What does he do to a human being? He said, look at this, verse 14 to 17. He says, 15. Asher im tzadakti lo e'aneh, limshofeti et hanan. Says, even if I'm right, I cannot speak up. I would plead with my judge. Im karati vaya'aneni lo amin ki yazin koli. Even if he answers me, I don't think that he will listen to what I have to say. Asher bisa'ara yeshufeni v'hirba petza'ai hinam. He has tortured me with the storm, and he multiplied my wounds for no reason. And now we see that when we read that, can we say that Eov, despite everything that happened to him, remained steadfast in his faith? Can we still say that? I mean, we were discussing the other day whether Eov is a righteous man or not. Still be a righteous man, but can we say that Eov, in all of his throughout his suffering, never uttered a word against God? Or do we see here something that is sort of an argument, sort of a disagreement with God? So I think that the word hinam, see the word hinam, yes, Yoel.
So I'm kind of getting the sense that the God he's experiencing is a God of anger,
yes,
which we often see throughout the Tanakh, Charonaf, Vayicharaf, that he has a sense of God of he's certainly he's not denying God, but his experience of God is one of Charonaf, of being very, very angry. and perhaps to the extent of chinam, and there's an element in chinam of denying. The truth is, he's absolutely correct. We know from the beginning of the book that he's correct, because in fact it is chinam. If chinam means nothing to do with Eov, it's not.
Right.
It's not. Eov has in fact.
Right.
In some sense, it's undeniable, but in another sense, you can interpret it as there's no tzedek. There's no tzedek.
Right. So Eov is upset. Eov argues that what is suffering has no reason, has no meaning. And before I hear you, 1 second, like Yoel mentioned, if you look here, Eov says, "Asher bis'ara yeshufeni, v'irba fetzai hinam." Right? Hinam for no reason. And if we go to the beginning of the book, to the discussion between Eov and between God and the Satan, God tells the Satan, "Look at Eov," and the Satan answers, "Hahinam yare Eov Elohim." Was it for Hinam that Eov fears you? And then he strikes him. He loses his children and all that, and Eov still does not express any blasphemy. So God tells the Satan, "Look what you've done. Vatesiteni bo levaleo hinam." You have moved me against him, destroy him without cause. But no, it was God who started that. So when Eov says in chapter 9, Asher bis'ara yeshufeni v'irba petzai hinam, that's not Eov. That's the author of the book telling us, you know what? In a way, Eov is right. It's really hinam. There's no meaning to his suffering here. Yes, Shai, you had a comment.
Yes. Many times we talk about emunah bitachon, right?
Mm-hmm.
So usually when you have bitachon with someone else, it's somebody that you can trust because they did good things to you. Now with Hashem, we have emunah, but many times we really kind of, certainly he lost his bitachon with Hashem. Yeah. He does have the emunah, but the bitachon after all this things that happened to him, so he lost the bitachon.
Right. He lost his trust, right? Confidence in Hashem. It's true. And I want to highlight something what you said about losing confidence. Why it could be so devastating for someone who's a believer to lose faith in God, and why many times you will see people who went through tragedies who would come back. Even people who lived through the Holocaust still cling to their faith. And one example that I remember personally, when I lived in Bogota, one of the most difficult periods of my life, there was a plane crash with about 130 people on board coming from Panama to Colombia. And there were, of course, the Jewish community was aware of the Jews. There were 8 Jews on the plane. 5 of them were from Bogota. Out of these 5, 2 were cousins. 1 was an only son. One's wife was expecting her first son after 4 daughters. And actually, it's appropriate that I'm mentioning it now because it happened on the 28th of Iyar. So it's the week of the Yortzeit, Yom Yerushalayim, 1994, something like that. And a cousin of one of the victims. It was a really horrible period. You can't imagine. Small community, losing so many people. I mean, we were all in Avelut. She told me that the first thing that she wanted to do when she heard about the plane crash, she said, she was one of the few really observant people in the community. She said, I wanted to grab a piece of non-kosher chicken and eat it. Sort of like a defiance to God, against God. And eventually she made peace with God on that issue. And so what happens there is, I think, we all need, it's really an essential need for human beings to have a pillar of confidence and trust in our lives, someone that we can rely on. Even people who go through difficulties in their childhood, if there's one a person that you could be someone in the family, could be a grandfather in many cases, could be sometimes a person outside the family, a mentor. If you have that safe place that you could go to, then you could sail through a lot of difficulties. And with humans, when we lose confidence in one person, we can sometimes find a replacement in another one. We will still go through a crisis of betrayal. I went, and I think we all go through crises of betrayal in our lives. It could be a partner, a business, people you work for. There could be a million, or even family members. And but if we had some kind of anger in our life, in our early life, that helps us move through that crisis of betrayal and switch from that person that we trusted and betrayed us to another person, right?
Rabbi, can I ask you a question?
Well, 1 second, David. Yeah, sure. I just want to finish that thought. Now, but what happens with the believer, and that's when it becomes dangerous, is people who trust in God and have their total confidence in Him, and they have no other outlet in humans. And then all of a sudden they feel that God betrayed them. There's no replacement for that. The sense of abandonment that David says, Eli, Eli, lama azavtani, right? Why have you abandoned me? The sense of despair, of neglect is so strong that it can destroy a person. So what happens there? If a person has inner strength and maybe confidence in himself or friends or others who are there to support him, and that's why in many cases, the community gathers during Shiva to give moral support to the person grieving, then that person can regain his trust in Hashem. But it has to be, again, in Hashem, because there's no replacement for the believer. But that's a very good point, Shai. Thank you for that. David, yes?
Rabbi, is it possible that the crux of this issue, to peel the onion, to get to the bottom of why somebody's bitachon breaks, is it just because, one word maybe, expectation? If you have expectations, whether of God or man, you are setting yourself up for potentially feeling betrayed, whether God or man. If you have no expectations, then, there's a sense of, and I want to be careful how I frame this, there's almost a sense of arrogance by Job to say, I don't deserve this. I mean, you're a human being, you're made of the dust, and you're going to go back to the dust. How do you have the confidence to say you don't deserve it? Are you all-knowing like God, so you can, really self-evaluate the way God evaluates you? Of course not. So seems to be arrogance and an expectation that's built in that maybe gets broken down after he realizes his mistake and does tshuva.
Yes, I hear. It's a good one. It's a very so in terms of expectations, my children, because of sometimes our hectic schedule of mine and my wife, have learned not to have expectations. Like when we say we're going to go on a trip somewhere, it happens sometimes that I had to cancel it sometimes because of a funeral, sometimes because someone wasn't feeling well, or my wife didn't want to travel. A million things. So when we say we're going to do this and that, and my daughter said, "Oh, okay." I said, "Why, you're not excited?" She says, "When I'll see it, I believe it." Like I don't want to build expectations because it might change. But on the other hand, even I'm thinking out the religion component. Living without expectation is a very sorry state of mind. It's a very I won't say sorry. It could be lonely. You could almost miserable. If we have no expectations, that means that we accept where we are and we're stuck where we are. We don't expect anything. We have to expect.
No, you won't strive for anything either. You'll just be,
Right. If you don't expect, you don't. We are right. Humans, we are built on hope.
Well,
we are built. Yes.
I think the distinction is having expectation of another, whether it's of God or of another human. Expectation of oneself is healthy. it prompts you to grow and to succeed. But
I understand. Okay.
expectation of the
Yeah.
others is the point.
Okay. Yeah. Let me address that. Yes. The thing is, as we can very, very well see right now, we're not lonely. We're not solitary beings. Each and every one of us, even if we are in the company of people, right? We long to be with more people. We are built on relationships, on connections. We are a social animal. This is built into our nature. And humans are quite unique in the way that developed as a social animal in difference in other. How many individuals can be in one's group of connections, and also how we can connect with people beyond our DNA. With most animals, when you see a group of animals that works and lives together as a flock, as a herd, whatever, they usually share the DNA, very closely. But humans, we can connect over spaces and distances. We need that connection. We need to have expectations of one another because there are many things that we cannot achieve alone in that world, and it's built into our psyche. So Eov is so I think the distinction is what you're saying is that we need to have expectations, we need to have hope, we need to have trust in ourselves and in others that will help us achieve what we can achieve. But what is wrong in this story of Eov, that his expectation is of a system that maybe doesn't exist, the system of tit for tat, good for good, evil for evil, directly according to your actions. And this doesn't happen. Each one of us knows a million stories, hopefully not so many. We know a lot of stories about very good people, righteous people, wonderful people who died at a young age, accidentally, terror attack, a disease. And on the other hand, we know a lot of evil people who do not deserve to be where they are, do not deserve to be successful. So this is what bothers Eov. And the question is he allowed to have these expectations? And his friend Elihu will get there. But as we see that at the end of this chapter, I think this is the first chapter, chapter 9, where Eov really starts spelling out what he feels. He says, after he's saying, Yirba Pitzai Hinam, he says, Hashem is doing it for no cause. He says this. And here comes, I think, also the ideology of Eov, the one I was referring to from the beginning, where Eov is doing all the right things for the wrong reason. He's not doing good for the sake of goodness. He doesn't believe that it's a good deed. It's only good because God told him it's good, because God told him that if he doesn't do it, he's going to get punished. So here, look what it says in verse 28. I am afraid of all my pains. I know that you will not hold me guiltless. I mean, you will find me guilty. I shall be condemned. Then why do I labor in vain? Someone who would later brag about him doing charity, helping the poor, helping the needy. But now he says, I'm going to be condemned, so why am I working in vain? If you believe in what you do, even if you suffer, you say, I don't care what is happening to me. I help so many people. I'm happy with that. But that's not what he says. He says, which, by the way, I think the imagery, the language is amazing of Eov. Really, one of the most beautiful wisdom literature books in Tanakh. He says, let's say that I would wash myself with snow water and I would clean my hands with soap, with borit. It's borax. I would clean my hands with the strong agents, and then I would be perfect, right? And by the way, this imitrahasti b'mei sheleg reminds us of Tehillim Nun Aleph, when David tells Hashem, even if I wash myself in snow, says, please wash me with snow so I will be pure. So, but the Eov says, even if I did that, then I would be the purest of the pure. As bashahat tivbeleni v'ti'avuni salmotai, you will plunge me in the ditch. The shahat usually is where there's tar. You would plunge me into the tar pits. V'ti'avuni simrotai, my clothes will abhor me. This is I want to say again, this is the image, the imagery of a bully, right? You get up, you clean your clothes, you're ready. It's like, let me go to school. Okay, I don't care that people bully me. The bully's coming, he pushes you again into the mud, and you're okay. You see, you can't get up. This is how Yov feels. And he tells God, after he says that, he says, Ki lo ish kamoni e'enenu, navo yahdav v'mishpat. For he is not a man, and I cannot answer him. I cannot come into judgment with him. Lo yesh benenu mochiach yashet yado al shnenu. There's no arbiter between us who could put his hand on both of us. Then I would not be afraid of him, and I could tell him what I think. You realize now when the beginning of the book I said Eov is always afraid of cursing God because he has a lot to tell him. He's afraid of the Freudian slip. He's afraid of going to work and telling his boss that he cannot tolerate him. And then he's going to lose his job. Eov is afraid of spilling this out, telling God, I wish we had an arbiter. And then you would answer me directly. I could argue with you. This is an interesting story of the beginning of the the neologist movement in Hungary. They were, according to some, more to the left or to the right of the Reform movement today. It doesn't matter. It was a story that comes from the Haredi circles who believe that the Reform movement didn't believe in God. So the story was that a Hasidic man came to Rabbi Aharon Horin, who was one of the first rabbis of the Neologian movement in Hungary, and he says, I have a din Torah, meaning I want to sue someone, and I want you, by the power of Torah in you, to judge, to be the arbiter. So the rabbi was flattered. He says, you're a Hasid, you're a very Orthodox Jew. Where do you live? He says, I live in this and that city, Budapest. I said, so why do you travel, all the way here to come to me for judgment? He says, because my local judge is biased. He prefers my, other party, the defendant. So the rabbi says, oh, and so who are you suing? He says, I'm suing God. So and I know that you're not biased towards God. You're okay with that. So funny, it's like trying to say that that story came from, like I said, the anti-reform movement in Hungary, trying to say that they did not fear God. But actually, my great-grandfather, the story runs in the family. I heard it from my mother, from my grandfather. He actually did that. During the Holocaust in 1941, he staged a din Torah in his synagogue, Ohel Rachel, in Jerusalem, and all the Kabbalists, people who studied mysticism, were sitting there, and he said, "I'm going now to stage a din Torah between Am Yisrael and God, and I'm going to accuse God of torturing Am Yisrael for no reason, and I'm going to prove to God that we as a nation, we are innocent and we should be acquitted, and that will force him to stop the Holocaust." That was the story. They eventually didn't work out because my great-grandfather warned the person who chose to be prosecutor. He said, I will be the defense attorney, and which really became him. It fitted him because he was always trying to find the positive in everyone. And he said, so I will be the defense attorney for Am Yisrael, and he picked a certain guy. He says, you will be the prosecutor. And he said, but please, when you go up to present your arguments, don't talk too much. Don't be an aggressive prosecutor. Just say, yeah, there are a couple of problems, and get down. It didn't work. That guy, when he got on the stage, got really excited and started saying that the Jews are this and this and this and this and that, and the whole thing was called off. It didn't work out. But my grandfather was really, all throughout the Holocaust, actually he started writing about it in 1933, was very well aware of what is happening in Germany, and was trying to conduct prayers and whatever he thought he could do to stop the disaster. Anyway, I'm going to go back to Eov. So you see that Eov in chapter 9, if you can say one of the chapters that really brings out Eov's opinion is chapter 9. He says, I would like to argue with God. I would like to tell him what I think. Nakta nafshi b'chayai. He says, I'm weary of my life. I don't want to live anymore. I says, please, why do you do this to me? And I think here in again something that reminds Tehillim. You can look at Tehillim 139, and you'll see something similar. I'm not going to go there now, because maybe I will wrap up Eov today. We have another half hour. I want to wrap it up today, so it's good. And then we can, if anyone who wants to study Eov in depth, could do later. But look, Eov says here, Zechorna ki kachomer asitani ve'la'afar teshiveni yadecha itzvuni vayasuni yachat savi v'tevale'ani. You have crafted me. You created me. A couple of psukim that look beautiful, but the choice of words in Hebrew, yadecha itzvuni. Le'atzev is to create, to fashion, but also reminds of the word etzev, sorrow, and atzabim, anger. So tevale'ani is you surround me, you swallow me, in a way of saying that almost you destroy me. So that is chapter 10. I'm going to go briefly over the next couple of chapters to just tell you the structure of the book. So Farah Na'amati answers in chapter 11, and again he attacks, like the other friends, attacks Eov. Harov devarim lo ya'aneh ve'imish sefatayim yitzdak. You think that just because you talk so much, you are right? No, you're wrong. And he goes on to say, Eov, you know nothing. Eov responds in chapter 12. I'm just reading some of the psukim. Vayan Eov vayomar, it's a beautiful pasuk, to his three friends. Omnam ki atem am ve'imachem tamut chokhmah. Says, you are truly a nation of three, and when you die, wisdom will die with you. This is a really, a biblical sarcasm. You hear that? He tells them, you are a nation. When you die, oh my God, there will be no more wise people. Very, very upset with them. So that's chapter 12. He says chapter 13, he says, I know everything, I've seen everything. He speaks about how it's better to be dead than to be alive. Adam yilud isha k'tzar yamim u'zvaroges. This is a pasuk that some people read in the Ashkava memorial services. Man that is born of woman is a few days and full of trouble. He comes forth like a flower and withers. He flees like a shadow and does not continue. But it doesn't say it in a good way. Again, he says, why do you care, God? My life is so short and you're eternal. Why do you care? And he can, in Eliphaz, what do you know? How can you fight with God? And this goes on. Eov says they speak, they shamati kaele rabot. I've heard a lot of this. And this goes on for like another 10 chapters until I'm going to skip to chapter 27. Eov, before that, speaks about his righteousness. And then we come to this beautiful chapter 28, called this chapter of wisdom. Ki yesh lakesef motza umakom lazahav yazoku. Silver comes from a mine and gold comes from a refinery. Barzel me'afar yukach ve'even yatzuk nechusha. Iron is taken out of dust, brass out of stone. Bread comes from the earth. You speak about the sapphires, the gold, where things come from. So all these physical elements, we could trace them back. We know where they come from. And there's another pasuk that we say in Ashkava, like all of the memorial services can be traced back to Eov. Ve'achokma me'ayin timatzeh ve'ezeh mekom bina. Says, where can you find wisdom? Where shall wisdom be found? Then he says, you cannot put value on it. You cannot find it in the abyss. You cannot find it in the sea. You cannot give precious jewelry for it. Then he repeats, the living creatures don't know where they are, where it is. Destruction and death don't know where it is. So Eov sort of comes to terms with what happens to him, and he says, the reverence of God is wisdom, and departing from evil is understanding. But this is Eov's understanding, that To be wise is just not to do that which God doesn't want. Eov now speaks in chapter 29 of how great he was. Who can bring me back to the days of my youth? God was with me. I had my children. I had my servants. The young men would hide themselves. The aged men would rise up. I would support the poor and the needy. Beautiful. I was like a king in the army. Yov reminisces on those. And he says now, this pasuk, I think, is another telling pasuk of who Yov is. He says, now, those who are younger than me laugh at me, those whose father has disdained to set with the dogs of my flock. This is someone who has a lot of arrogance. Yes, he's suffering, but to say, who are those people who are laughing at me? I wouldn't even have their fathers work with my dogs. So he's someone on the one hand, he could speak about the needy and the poor, and I will help them. At the same time, he could speak about other humans as dogs. Again, like I said, this is someone whose behavior did not change him. Okay, I'm going to skip this one. Again, okay. We get to chapter 32. This is where there's a surprise, a turn in the story. I meant to mention it before. Remember that we said that Eov had three friends. He had three friends. Eliphaz HaTemani, Bildad HaShuhit, Sofar HaNa'amati. And his wife is there. They have presented so far, three schools of thought regarding suffering. Eshet Eov's wife said, the world is unjust, commit suicide, goodbye. Eov said, the world is unjust, maybe it's astrology, maybe it's something else, but the system doesn't work, but I cannot commit suicide. I wish I could argue with God, but I can't. I have to do what he says because he's more powerful. He's someone who's unchanged by what he does. The three friends believe in the system of good and evil, and they tell Eov, even though you think you're righteous, you're not. Your children, the innocent young men and women who died, deserved it. Those are the three opinions. Now appears a new person in this story. And it's very, is enigmatic. We don't know where he came from. וישבתו שלושת האנשים האלה מענות את איוב, כי הוא צדיק בעיניו. Those three men stopped answering Eov. They don't talk to him anymore because he considers himself righteous. ויחר אף אליהו בן ברכאל הבוזי ממשפחת רם. And then the wrath of Elihu ben Berechel Habuzi from the family of Ram, his wrath was kindled. Be'Iyov hara'apo al tzedeko nafsho me'Elohim. He was angry at Eov for thinking that he's more righteous than God. Uvishloshet re'av hara'apo al asher lo matzu ma'aneh vayarshu et Eov. And he's upset at the other three people for incriminating Eov. So who is this person? Where does he come from? Look at his name. His name is very symbolic. Elihu ben Berechel Habuzi mimishpachat Ram. There's a lot of genealogy here. So let's start with this word, Berechel.
Bless God.
Bless God, right? What was the greatest fear of Eov? Barech Elohim, right? So Elihu is the son of Berechel. But in the good sense, he says, don't come to me with this fear of cursing God because you have to bless God. What is Elihu? Even though it's menukad with hataf segol, which means strength, but it also means Elihu. He is my God. So Elihu ben Berechel is someone. What?
Representing God.
Yeah. So he represents God. Now, he is buzi. What is the word buz in Hebrew? What does it mean? It means shame, disgrace. So he is going to present here an opinion, a theology which is disgraced and rejected. People don't like it. But he comes from a very important family, min mishpachat Ram. Ram is elevated. So he's a distinguished person whose opinions are unheard, but also, Yoel? You
No, just say God is also Ram V'Nisa. I don't know if that's...
God is Ram V'Nisa, right? And also, another thing, I told you who I think is the author of the book, Yirmiyahu, and the root of the name Yirmiyahu is Ram. So there's a hint here to who is the author of the book. So now the Navi says, Ve'elihu hika et Yov bidvarim, ki zekenim hema mimenu leyamim. Elihu didn't speak because he's the youngest. Symbolic. The opinions that Yov and his wife and his friends present are ancient. That's how people believed in the past. Elihu is the new concept. He's the young generation. He says, Tza'ir ani leyamim ve'atem yeshishim. I'm young and you're very old. I thought, he says, Amarti yamim yadaberu ve'rov shanim yodiu chokhmah. I thought that your days will speak and the multitude of years will teach wisdom, meaning because you're older, you're wiser, but it doesn't work. So that's chapter 32. Chapter 32, he says, if you look there, it says, I am going to talk now. I'm going to tell you what I think. This, basically, from verse 11 to verse 22, there are different, all synonyms to say, I have to speak, I'm going to speak now. And you say, okay, are you going to speak? Or it's just an introduction? Okay, so hopefully in the next chapter, so we go to chapter 33, and remember that this is not the traditional division of the Jewish division. But anyway, it's another chapter, another 20, 30 Besukim. He says, why do you think that you're righteous? Why do you fight with God? There is a reason, but again, still doesn't tell us what he's going to say. It's an introduction. Chapter 34. Shim'u hachamim milai, listen to me. I know what I'm saying. He says, El lo yarshia v'shadai lo ya'avet mishpat. You're right. God is not going to distort justice. And he says, Iyov lo beda'at yedaber udvarav lo be'askil. But still, what Iyov says is not beda'at, not be'askil. And in chapter 35, I think Iyov finally delivers, after 3 chapters of introduction, where he takes us through God is right, Iyov is suffering, we don't know exactly what happens. He explains his theology. That's the theology of Yirmiyahu. Vayaran Elihu vayomar. Elihu now raised his voice. Vayaran is more like a testimony, not just an answer. He says, Hazot hashavta lemishpat, amarta tzidki me'el. Is this what you think is right for you to say, I am more righteous than God? Not before God. I am more righteous than God. Ki tomar ma yiskon lach, ma o'il mehatati. When you say, what advantage do I have from my good deeds, and what profit shall I have if I withhold my sin? Ani ashivcha milin ve'et re'echa imach. I'm going to answer you and your friends. Which, by the way, this sounds very Israeli, right? Let me answer you and your friends. Habet shamayim ur'eh v'shur shehakim gavehu mimeka. Look under the heavens and see, and behold the skies which are higher than you. Im hatata ma tif'al bo ve'rabu feshaecha ma ta'aseh lo. If you have sinned, what have you done against him? And if your transgressions are more, how do you affect him? So if you do negative, it does not affect God. Im tzadakta matiten lo, oma miyadecha yikach. And if you do right, what have you given God? You give charity. God is unimpressed. You didn't change God. He's immutable. And again, if I mentioned verse, not Nun Aleph, verse, chapter Nun in Tehillim, God says, I don't need anything from you. If I need anything, I could take it. I created the world. I could take whatever I want. Leish kamocha rish'echa uleven adam tzidkatecha. Your righteousness, your wickedness is for you, for people like you, and your righteousness is for people like you. Merov ashukim yazriku yeshave'u mizrah rabim. Those are oppressed by others and cry out for help. In other words, take this, those 6 words, Deish kamocha rish'echa uleven adam tzidkatecha. I think I mentioned in one of our early classes before we started learning Yov, Keseder, in order, even though we didn't do it in order because it's so really a very, very long text, and it's important to read it with, I guess, a concordance and a dictionary and translations, and dig into the words, read Robert Alter's translation or others. But those 6 words in chapter 35, Leish kamocha tzidkecha ol ben adam rish'atecha, those, they are in, it's verse 8. Chapter 35, if someone asks you, what are the most important words in the Tanakh? So alongside the 10 Commandments, in the kamocha, which is the word kamocha, you will say, Iyov 35:8, Leish kamocha tzidkecha ulven adam rishatecha. He says this, the system of good and evil is not for you, and is not for God, but for others. This is how we treat each other. If you do good, it affects people like you. And if you do evil, it affects people like you. It could be, like I said, that the system of miraculous reward and punishment worked for the first 2,000 years until the destruction of the first temple, second temple. Then God switches to this system. But actually, Yirmiyahu writes this already 700 years before the Common Era. So 2,700 years ago, Yirmiyahu tells people this. The way to fight evil in the world is not by prayer, even though prayer is important, and it's not by doing the right thing and hoping that God will reward you. Prayer is good because it prompts us to do good, and it makes us better people. And yes, it's a communication with God, but not always we feel the two-way communication. But if we think of it this way, if I do good, I'm making the world a better place. And if I do evil, I make the world a worse place. Now, I could choose, which a lot of people do, to draw my little square or circle and encase myself in it and say, I don't care what happens to the rest of the world. Right? Silicon Valley millionaires have their bunkers in New Zealand. They flew there. They're now underground. And okay, let the rest of the world, I don't know, what happens to them can happen to them. And in any case, in any time, any generation, every place you could see that. People who say, my house is my fortress, après-moi le déluge. I don't care what happens to the rest of the world. As long as my little patch of heaven is working, I'm happy. And then there are people who would do whatever they can to help the world. Now, does this really work? Or people give up and say, "Oh, I can never change the world, right? The world can never be a better place." So first of all, there is a book that was published a couple of years ago by Steven Pinker called "The Better Angels of Our Nature," showing that the world in general is tilting towards a better place in terms of death rate per person, etc. There is an improvement, not enough, but there is an improvement. But remember that I told you that I started working on this analysis of Iyov shortly after 9/11. Almost immediately after 9/11, because I lived in Brooklyn at the time. I was a rabbi at Bet Torah, which is on Ocean Parkway, and between Avenue L and J, right, on Avenue K. I mean, there's no avenue there. That's what I'm saying, between. And a lot of the people in my shul were at the site when this happened and walked over the Brooklyn Bridge back to the city. It was really very scary. So I had to give a certain, Rasha, Rabbi, how can you talk about that? Like this such an atrocity. How can you even talk about that? It was so scary. It's scary to think that humans are capable of doing that. So I started this analysis and I was following the news like I think all of us did at the time. And something very, very interesting popped up that caught my eye. And that, two things actually. One is that the attendance of religious places, of all religions, went up after 9/11. And second was that the crime was declining for 6 consecutive months after 9/11. From petty thefts to bigger things, people were more reluctant to commit crimes in the United States. how I interpreted that was in light of what I told you now about Eov. People felt that they need people felt they needed this connection to God to recompensate for this great evil that happened, and they wanted to find the divinity in them, to find solace, to find comfort, to find a reason to move on. But they also felt that the balance, sort of like we have a balance. Because remember that I start with the question of, when do we ask the question, why do bad things happen to good people? When the balance is interrupted, when something happens out of the ordinary, someone innocent, someone that we think did not deserve it, a random disaster, something in a magnitude that cannot be imagined. So people felt that the balance has been disrupted, so they have to restore the balance. How do you restore the balance? By doing good deeds. And I think this is an amazing insight. Unfortunately, I don't know, sometimes it pains me that we cannot deliver it to all of mankind. And in a way, this like coronavirus, we thought it will be, enlighten more people. Hopefully it will. But a lot of people will still remain sort of in the darkness of their own mind. Imagine what would have happened, like a thought exercise. And we need to do this thought exercise. People told me when I present this theory, but wait, there are natural disasters, terrorist attacks and wars, etc., and diseases that we cannot control. So some numbers. The last time I checked, and I think last year was also the same, the number of people who died of diseases transmitted in hospitals, viruses, etc., because the medical staff did not wash hands and did not keep the procedures of hygiene, was about 70,000 people in the United States. That's more than 1 year in the United States, more than all of I think the global victims of the virus right now. So imagine that all the medical staff back then would have kept this, right? Kept the regulations, save all these people from dying. The burden on the system is alleviated. More money could be channeled to research, etc. But okay, we're not doctors. Most of us are not, and we're regular people, just going around town with our business. So I'll give you an example from the two cities I lived in, Brooklyn and LA, where there's always traffic jams. There's nowhere to park, right? So imagine that there would be no double parking, no violations of traffic laws. Everybody would be, follow the rules to the letter. Then traffic police would be out of work because everybody would be perfect, right? Imagine like if people know there's no human error, no accidents. If traffic police is out of work, then maybe they have more time and efforts to invest in other things. So they could take care of burglaries and others. But what if burglars and petty thefts and other crimes are not happening because people decide to do good? Again, more time is now available to take care of other things, every little thing, and continue this exercise. It is the fate of the world at the end of the day is in the hand of humans. But too often, religion steps in and says, don't worry, you just do what you need to do for your God. God will take care of you. And I think that right now we're seeing that if there is a message that we get in this, global situation, the pandemic, is that God tells us you must take things into your hands. Unfortunately, I still hear from many religious people not speaking. The majority doesn't think that way. They still think of, okay, God is showing this to the world, to us, and maybe we have to pray harder. When this is over, we'll make bigger minyanim, and pray more. And the answer is no. You have to read the book of Eov and start working to make the world a better place. That's what I think is the message of Yirmiyahu that's still ringing from 2,700 years ago.